Hello, hello. My name is Jess, and this is Patient POV. And today we get to hear from Sophie, and we talk about specifically her endometriosis. And we also jump into some health inequities and also like the challenges of getting diagnosed with endometriosis, as well as her struggles with getting diagnosed. She also talks about some good websites that you could visit to get some really good information as well. And so, just a reminder that that's all linked in the bio below in the description. And so, if you want to refer to any of that or you want to kind of see some highlights of the podcast and like some good things that were said, I try to pull out a few things that you can take with you as some applicable usable notes from it, the podcast episode. And so, yeah, I'm so excited for you to listen to her, which will be in just a minute. As always, please feel free to subscribe. There's typically a question like, "What did you think of this episode?" Or I think last week's had a question of, is this something you've experienced as well? Or, oh no, I think last week's question was about how to support our friends with chronic illnesses or disabilities. And so it gave you an opportunity to be able to give your feedback. So if anybody has anything else they'd want to share, they can go back to last week's episode, which was episode 16, I want to say. Oh, no, 17, episode 17. So if you want to answer that question there. And then this week, there'll be another question that you can respond to if you want, or there might be a poll. So there's some fun things you can do. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at JESS underscore and underscore Elda, which is ELDA. So Jess underscore and underscore Elda. And yeah, so that's that. Now, as I'm trying to have the intro, not just me talking about nothing or just an overview, I wanted to also include a little bit about either me or a question or a story or something like that. And I want you guys to have the opportunity to be able to join in on this part of the intro. And so you can find a link at my bio of my Instagram account, and you can also fill out the form, and your thoughts, questions, stories might get included in this intro part of it. But for today, what I wanted to do was I actually found something on my pictures and I wanted to share it with you guys. And so I was, don't know why I did this, but I ended up going through Snapchat memories and I found a picture from 2018, I think it was, and 2018, 2019, something like that. And it was a picture of a piece of paper that I had wrote. And at that point, I wasn't diagnosed with anything. And it had simply said something along the lines of, um, get up early in the morning, get up on time, because you are going to make mom late and she's going to be sad. And not that she was actually mad, but a kid not getting out of the house on time can sometimes be annoying when you don't know why they're doing it. You're just thinking it's teenage things. And I said um something along the lines of stop being lazy and just get up out of bed. And so I reflect on that now and I feel sad for my younger self because I called myself lazy and I said, I don't know why I can't just get out of bed. Like, I don't know why I'm just blah, 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 fill in the blank. I'm just lazy. I'm just um, not wanting to. I'm just whatever it may be. And I just was reflecting on that and I showed it to my family and they kind of laughed and were like, haha, yeah, like you sometimes do take a while to get out the door. But then I was really reflecting on it and I was like, that's kind of sad that like I felt like I was just insert description there, like lazy as I had written it on this note, when in fact I just was undiagnosed. And I was telling myself all these things because I wasn't acknowledging the feelings that I was feeling. And I was gaslighting myself at that point as well, saying that this is normal. This is all in my head. I'm just blah, blah, blah. And so that's something we also talk about in this episode about how medical trauma in particular can make you feel like you are or medical gaslighting in particular can make you feel like your feelings are not valid and that it's all in your head. And so this is also just an important reminder that it isn't always just in your head and you need to trust your body even when you feel like you can't, which is really hard. But this is just some words of encouragement if you are listening and you are feeling like you can't trust your body, that you need to try to do an internal assessment of your body and decide what is going on and go based on that because you can only work with the information you're given. And if your information you're given is from your body saying this hurts, you have to trust your body. I think trust is a very large thing that needs to be learned about how, or I guess it would have to be relearned, I think, and specifically about your body and trusting yourself and believing in yourself. And I think that's an interesting um, psychological point of chronic illness that definitely needs to, I think somebody should do a research project on that or something like that. Um, but yeah, that's the story I wanted to share with you guys today. Like I said, please feel free to subscribe, but I'm really excited for you to get to listen to Sophie. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a great week ahead. Hello, hello. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. Do you want to just
Good.
jump right on in and give us an introduction on who you are and kind of your health journey background, what's going on with you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sophie. I have endometriosis amongst a whole bunch of other things that have sort of piled up over the years. I was diagnosed with endo back in 2020, towards the start of 2020. And pretty soon after that diagnosis, I started up an Instagram account and I started sharing my journey, sharing my feelings, all that sort of thing, because I felt really let down by the healthcare system and my experiences, and I felt super alone. And it was initially just a way for me to process what I had been through and what I was experiencing.
Amazing. Yeah. And we'll get into that in just a second. But
Mm.
as I try to ask all the guests who come on, is there any
Mm.
TV shows, movies, or books that you're currently watching or reading that has nothing to do with, it doesn't have to do with chronic health, but what are you into right now?
You know what? Guilty pleasure. I'm sort of a bit ashamed to admit this, but Love Island is on at the moment in the UK. And I have been watching that every night. I can't help myself. I know it's trashy telly, but sometimes it's good to just watch something that requires like no brain power.
No, for sure, for sure. I love that. That's great. Okay, well, let's just jump right into what we were talking about here.
Yeah.
Is you were mentioning how you felt kind of let down by the healthcare system. Can you
Mm.
jump into a little bit on what made you feel let down or kind of
Mhm.
why you say that those types of things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before I became poorly, which happened in 2019, I hadn't really like I'd only been to the hospital for like a broken ankle or like acute things that just happen in life sometimes.
Mhm.
I had never experienced the medical system as I now have, which was for me a year of constant like gaslighting, constantly being told that my pain and my symptoms are in my head. At one point, I was left collapsed in a bathroom, calling for help for like half an hour, and everyone decided to ignore me. I've had nurses laugh about why I was in hospital, saying I just had a period and how pathetic that is, and that sort of thing. It was just like a year of like pretty much like hell, where I became convinced that all my suffering, all my pain that turned out to be endo, I was just making it up or I was too sensitive. And I don't think I had a single positive experience of asking for help, which really sucks, right? Because you go into hospital, you're super vulnerable. Um, and then to be received that way was just like mind-boggling to me.
No, for sure. I'm really sorry to hear that that happened. And it's always unfortunate when people don't have positive experiences within the hospitals when you're trying to get help. And
Yeah.
so what I if I know you've done a little bit of research into endometriosis and, why it's so hard
Mm.
to get diagnosed, and can you dive into that of, like, what makes endometriosis so hard to diagnose?
Yeah, I think so. I think endometriosis primarily affects women. It does, but primarily women,
Mhm,
and women's health historically has been like majorly neglected. And I think that's like a continuation what we're seeing right now. So people assume that because one of the symptoms of endometriosis is like excruciating period pains, that endometriosis is just a period or it's just normal period pain, which doesn't really exist. Like periods shouldn't be excruciating, and if they are, there's usually something going on. But it's this real dismissal, in my experience at least, and I know a lot of other people's, of being like a little girl who can't cope with pain. It's that sort of just that belittling of our symptoms, and women just aren't taken as seriously as men. Even when they present in A&E, for example, studies have shown that men are given more pain relief than women are, even if they're presenting saying they have the same level of pain. We're just not taken that seriously. And that is something that really needs to change.
mhm, for sure, yeah, and then I know you wrote an article, I was
Mhm.
kinda reading up on some things that you've
Ah.
worked on, and, you were mentioning something about funding for research. Is that something that you were writing
Yeah.
about?
So this is crazy. I hadn't really massively looked into it before. I sort of, right, you can guess that there's probably not much given what people with endometriosis generally experience. But when I looked into like the numbers, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but they are minuscule when you look at the grand scheme of things. Endometriosis and women's health generally is given such a tiny amount of funding for research, for awareness projects, for all these different things. And it's just shocking because endo affects 1 in 10. It's
Mm.
not rare, like it's super common, but it just doesn't seem to get the attention of the people that need to be putting money where their mouths are, basically.
Yeah, and I think in the article that you wrote, you had
Mm,
mentioned that 1 in 10 were diagnosed with endometriosis and 1 in 10 are
mm.
diagnosed with diabetes.
Yeah, in the retrospective populations, yeah.
Right, and then you were mentioning that it was like $1 and some cents was for endometriosis for research, and it was like 40 some dollars for diabetes per person, I think it was.
Person, yeah, it was
Yeah,
per person. It's like ridiculous.
yeah.
And again, it's just this narrative that endo like isn't that severe or is just a period or I don't know. It's so bizarre to me because the first-hand experience and also seeing people in the endo community, it can have such a devastating impact on people's lives, and that's just not recognized enough.
Mhm. And so if you were in this well, I mean, you were in this position, but if you
Mm,
were talking to somebody who's currently in that position of they think something is more wrong than just a regular period, and they're struggling to get a diagnosis because they're being told, like, "Stop being so dramatic or overreacting." What would you say to them to either tell them to keep going or when to give up, or what would you tell them?
so it's tough. I think I would always encourage people to get second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion. Like sometimes you have to, it sounds bad, but you essentially have to shop around for like a doctor who actually listens to you.
Mm,
Oftentimes the first or the second doctor that you speak with is belittling and is dismissive. But there are some good doctors out there. Like it's not always all bad. There are people who do listen and who are aware of endo. So you really just have to try and keep that fight in you. And if you're struggling with that, take someone with you who is good in those sort of situations. Like I always have my mum with me because she's very like to the point and forceful, and I wasn't like that initially.
right.
So if you've got someone around you like that, take them with you because it definitely helps.
No, for sure. And so just for context for everyone who's listening, whereabouts in the world are you located?
Yeah, I'm in England.
You're in
I know you're
England?
in Canada, aren't you? But yeah, we're in
Yes.
England here.
Yeah, awesome. And so then, how would you say your experience navigating the England healthcare system, the UK healthcare system, I guess it would
Yeah,
be?
yeah, the
How is navigating
NHS.
that? Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, oh, it's so difficult. So there aren't many like specialists in the world for conditions like endo anyway. And in the UK we have in the NHS, which is like a free healthcare system. We're very fortunate that we have that. Um, there are a few specialist centres spread across the country, but getting to see any of the consultants there is like nearly impossible for a lot of people. So like going to the GP and asking them to refer you on, you, in my experience anyway, is like talking to a brick wall. Like they really are difficult to get through to. And that it just feels like there's so many hoops that you have to jump through in order to get someone who knows what they're talking about, which makes the process of like diagnosis and all that sort of thing and treatment makes it super long. And whilst you're waiting for that to happen and you're being met with this dismissal, your endo's progressing and you're getting more and more unwell. And then it becomes more and more difficult to fight your corner and advocate for yourself. So it's like a cycle of just really difficult emotional appointments.
No, for sure. And so just
Mhm.
to confirm, I
Mm,
know in the States, you
yeah,
can request a particular doctor and you don't really need I've heard some situations where like you don't really need to be referred for an appointment.
really,
Yeah, and then in Canada, I think it sounds similar to what you're saying is like you need to be
yeah,
referred from your GP to the
yeah,
specialist. Is that the same what you're mentioning there?
yeah. That's it. Unless you've got private healthcare, then that's a bit different. But for most people who don't have loads of money,
Right.
that's the process that you'd go through. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Very interesting. And so then in your personal day-to-day life, what would be some
Mm,
of the challenges that you face and how do you cope with them?
mm. It depends, I guess, because I don't have the same level of pain every single day, but take me like on a bad day, say. So there's so much that I can't do, like really basic things. I can't get dressed a lot of the time. I can't make myself food, which is where my partner comes in very handy. He'll bring me all the snacks, which is great, but it's just simple things. When you're in such an extreme level of pain, you're bedbound,
Mm.
and it's really difficult emotionally as well, like not always being able to socialize as much. I find that quite difficult. Um, and that's, I think, what can make it a bit of a lonely condition is not only feeling like no one believes you, but also you're literally isolated because a lot of the time you're just unwell and you're in the house or you're in bed. Um, and that is like a big barrier for me, at least. It's something I find really difficult. I like talking, I like being social, and that's tough.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, we do love a good support system, so that's awesome.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you were mentioning some of those challenges. Have you found any
Mm.
coping strategies in particular for any of the issues you mentioned?
I think, like you said just now, a support system makes the world of difference.
Yeah.
I don't know what I do without Harv. So that is like huge. We recently got a dog, a puppy, and oh my goodness, that makes a big difference emotionally because you feel less lonely and there's a reason to like it might sound a bit miserable, like you've got a reason to get up and like try and go out for a walk even if maybe you're not feeling your best. Like
Mhm,
there's more sort of purpose to your day, especially if you can't work properly,
mhm,
which is me in my case. It adds like it's a bit more meaning and it makes things easier.
mhm.
um Other than that, it's just coping with the pain, different strategies for pain relief and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. We love dogs here. My dog is sleeping right beside me here, so when we're done recording, I'll show you her. What kind of dog do you have?
She's a cockapoo. She's 8 months now. I
Oh,
know. What do
so
you have?
a golden retriever.
I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
So fun. And so you were just mentioning about not being able to have like a traditional job, let's say of like a every single Monday through Friday 9 to 5 type of job. What are
Yeah.
you currently doing for your work?
I've just finished training to become a doula, which
Yay!
yes, it's very exciting. I can't wait.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's something I've wanted to do for the longest time. It just took me a while to like I think get the confidence to actually go for it and start. And it's self-employed, which is amazing because it means that I'm my own boss. Like I can control how many people I take on at what times. If I'm not so well, I just won't take on as many families. Like it's got that freedom that means I can actually work, because in a 9 to 5, if I'm being employed by someone else, I wouldn't last in a job like that, because it's my health is unpredictable sometimes, and I can be incapacitated like at really short notices. And I've just heard, sadly, a lot of horror stories of people working in those sort of quote unquote normal jobs,
Mhm.
um, with employers, and it's just something that I can't face.
Yeah, and so, as a doula, what's
Mm.
your job? What would you be doing there?
Yeah, so there's two types. So I've trained in both. So there's a birth doula, which is someone who supports people whilst they're pregnant and then is there for the actual birth with them. So it's not a medical professional, but it's someone who's got lots of knowledge around birth and who provides emotional support and practical support and can advocate for you, which is super important, um, to have. And then there's a postnatal doula, which is someone who helps maybe come up with a postnatal plan and spends a certain amount of hours over the first few weeks with you after your baby's been born. And again, it's like practical support, emotional support, signposting for further help that you might need, that sort of thing. And I'm just, it's like a dream. I can't wait to start.
That's amazing, yeah, and so, do you have one side of that you prefer, or are you gonna do both sides, or
I'm gonna do both. I've sort
Awesome.
of so I've worked as a nanny and with babies, like young babies, for a while before. So with the postnatal side of things, I've not been specifically a postnatal doula, but I do have like very similar experience in that already.
Mhm,
The birth stuff is like completely new to me. But so I studied psychology at uni, and before
mhm.
I did that, I was torn between psychology and midwifery. So I've always like been interested in this, and this feels like a perfect like marriage of those two things.
No, for sure, and so how has your personal health journey, impacted um how you not treat your patients, 'cause, of course, you're going to treat them also well, but how has that impacted how you are going to work or how you approach
Yeah,
situations, should I say?
yeah. I think there's a couple of ways. I think since I became unwell, I've definitely become more of an empathetic person.
Mhm,
I mean, I've always been like that, but it's like massively increased now. And I think I'm more in tune with other people's feelings than I used to be, which comes in really handy in a job like that, because so much of it is emotional support and just showing up and listening. Um, but on the other side of that as well, I have experience of the healthcare system and how that sometimes treats us. So I also have a lot of experience of advocating for myself and advocating for other people. And again, that comes in handy, because there's so much that goes on in like maternity and care and all that stuff. So I think that is a big thing. And perhaps also, I mean, I don't know this, but maybe for people who are disabled, who have chronic illnesses, it might be nice having someone who they know gets that,
mhm.
support them through the process. Because I think having someone who understands makes like a huge difference.
For sure, yeah.
Mm,
And so then if we're jumping back into you in particular,
yeah.
if I don't know if you have a typical daily life, but what would a day in the life of you look like?
Oh gosh, okay. I'm not sure I do have a typical day in the life, because I'm also doing like a part-time remote content creating like job.
Mm,
So get up 7 a.m. nice and early with the dog, let her out, give her a food, and then I usually take her on, if I'm doing well, I'll take her on like a longish morning walk. He is full of beans at the moment, so I need to go out with her, otherwise she's manic. Um,
yeah.
and then I just crack on with a little bit of work from home. I'm pretty much always home. I don't really, at the moment, I'm not really leaving the house for my work stuff. It's either my Instagram that I'm doing or the other content work.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I just spend as much time as possible with my dog and with my boyfriend. And I love to read, so a lot of my days involve reading and writing and things like that. And then just trying to function. Some days, a typical day looks like me just being in bed all day and like rolling around in pain. It really differs.
Yeah, no, for sure. I remember my dog at 8 months old, and that's a ball of energy. That's
So much.
the teenage years. Oh, Yeah.
out of nowhere. Like she used to listen quite a lot, and suddenly she's like, "Nope, I don't want to hear you," and she's like, does her own thing, just completely ignores me.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Everybody says they didn't like the puppy phase. I loved the puppy phase. The teenage phase was the one I was like, "Oh, oh, no." Yeah, too
Yeah.
funny. And so you were mentioning before how, the year in particular before your diagnosis when you were getting very much gaslit by doctors, how did that year, or that time period impact your mental health and how you are now approaching situations?
Yeah, it's definitely had a long-lasting impact. I mean, to this day, even if I have like just a blood test or a GP appointment that's completely separate from like my normal health issues, I will like shake. I feel really sick. Like I really can't deal with the anxiety that I get from these just from speaking to like a medical professional. Um, I mean the gaslighting got so bad that I wouldn't have believed anyone really if they tried to like tell me that it was endometriosis because I had a surgery actually when like sort of a couple of months into my symptoms starting. I had a laparoscopy, not with a specialist. Um, and they said they didn't find anything. And then my symptoms continued and I was still really unwell, but I was completely convinced I was making it all up and that somehow my brain was like, it was psychosomatic.
Mm.
Um, and when I had my second surgery with the specialist and I woke up and they told me they found endo, the first thing I said to my mum and my boyfriend was, I'm not crazy because I was completely convinced that I'd like lost my mind and that I was making all these things up without realizing. Um, and it's a really hard place to be when you feel like you can't trust yourself.
Mm.
Um, and that's something that's lingered for a long time. I'm definitely better than I used to be in terms of like now if I feel a symptom, I will tell them this is what I'm feeling. I'm certain that it's this. Like you have to take me seriously.
Mhm.
Um, but it doesn't mean that like I suppose the medical trauma doesn't still have an impact because, like I said, my body will physically shake because it's so stressful to me.
No, for sure. And it's understandable. It's that is one thing that I find really surprising and at the
Mhm.
same time very crazy, is the fact that how many people, especially with people with endometriosis, have been gaslit and mistreated by the healthcare system to the point where they are the ones who are consistently needing medical attention or going to see doctors, but they hate it the most. And so it's very backwards, in my opinion.
It's so bad because I put a post on my story the other day about that. There's this like complex that so many of us have about going to A&E, so to emergency. Um, Sometimes the pain is so severe that like you actually like I've thought this, like I've thought I'm gonna have a seizure and die. Like this is it. This is how it ends. Even after I got my diagnosis and I knew what it was, I've still thought that multiple times. Um, and sometimes we can't differentiate. So that pain might actually be like a twisted ovary, or it might be kidney stones, or it might be something else that really does need medical attention. But there's this reluctance to go and get help, even in those emergency situations, because you just expect to be meted with resistance.
Mm.
Um, and you feel like oh, it's pointless, no one's going to take me seriously. And that can lead to really like dangerous situations because sometimes you really do need help when
Mhm.
people don't go and get that help because they're afraid of what support or lack of support will be offered.
Mhm. For sure, for sure.
Mm.
And so, in your entire journey of healthcare and all this, have you found any resources or anything that you are consistently using to help with either the pain or just with education or anything like that?
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of really great charities that I'll name drop a few for you.
Please, yeah.
There's Endo South Coast, Endo Buddies. I think there's one, the Menstrual Health Project, which does more than just endometriosis, but they have like really good resources, especially for people who maybe don't have a diagnosis yet and are needing a bit of help, like navigating that journey through the medical system. Um, and I think just the online community generally. I mean, there's always good and bad to everything, especially in the online world, but generally speaking, it's been like a blanket. Like it's so supportive. It's really nice to connect with people who understand. Um, and that is a massive help. And then physically, obviously you've got medication that you speak with your doctor about and all that stuff. But I think things like heat are massively underrated. Like I've got an electric heat mat. That is like my best friend. I love it so much. That's constantly on me, basically. TENS machines, like there are other options other than just the medication that you can get that you can use alongside that do make a big difference. You just got to research it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm hearing a lot about heat as well, and so that's a great recommendation for people to try for sure. And then,
So good. Yeah.
yeah, and so what is I know you're mentioning that you're doing a lot of online stuff. You started that when you started your health journey, shall we say. What made you want to become a health advocate or have that online presence?
Yeah. Initially, I think it was like a selfish thing in that I was just lost and lonely. And so I felt so like outraged at my experiences and I needed an outlet for that. And I figured if my experience has been this terrible, there's probably people who have had similar experiences. So let me just share it and see if anyone like says, "Oh yeah, I've had this too," or "This is my experience." And then that like snowballed into something bigger than I initially anticipated it would be. Um, and now I just have like a fire in my belly. Like I want everyone to know about it and know about the treatment that so many people receive and the lack of funding and all that stuff. And I just want to raise awareness because I'm just one person. Like I can't change everything, but if I can make someone talk to their friends about it or their family about it, and then someone else knows, and then they speak to someone else, that makes a difference. Like that makes a huge difference.
For sure, for sure. And so, as my last question for you today, do you have any words of encouragement or advice for anyone who's either starting their health journey or right in the thick of it, for them?
Mm, um, I think I would tell them to reach out for support, and if they don't have people physically like in their area around them, to not be afraid of connecting with the online support that's available through charities, but also just through content creators that are sharing their health journeys. There's a lot of comfort that can be found in even just messaging people who understand and who share your experiences and who hold space for you to share your feelings. Um, and I would just tell them that they're not alone in that because it can be really lonely, but you're not alone.
Thank you for that. That's amazing. Yeah. And where can everyone find you?
Yeah, what am I? I'm just trying to think what was that. It's at SophieLucy.Sager on Instagram. Yeah.
Perfect. Amazing. Yeah. And so on the show description notes, I will also tag you in there as well so people can
Cool.
find you nice and easily.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
great.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for joining us. I do appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I love talking about it.